The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of eons, and I'll see it, hear it, receive it, and uphold it. I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning in order to liberate all sentient beings, thus generate the supreme bodhicitta. Well, today we're going to begin our class on the Sutra on Buddha's bequeathed teaching. During the winter retreat, I translated this teaching, this sutra from Chinese language into Tibetan language. So I'm going to proofread it and chant it before class every day.
Lagzang darwar shi so teni tse keng teni kze keng darshan darwim zapa yongsir zogne njam tang evim changkong de shang sala zong ge zhong de kem nyang len de per zamso di tse tombe lobmar nam la dipi chun de tar de kar zar to gerlong ta dag nyang len da wi go de chechak ge suzur tarbi tsachim de jiper zong te lagbrov zhong re shago dana mambalar noam chungwa tang gurwe norwer ne partago go chechak ki tomba na tsachim de yembr shibr sharte dang jiktin der ne ba tang kyabr kyad mamchi so tsachim yang ta brin zambi kangzig ki nyochong shepa tang khepong chorwa tang kimjang nerwa tang oyongkur kyungwa tang goshig sowa tang tsishang mowa tang genur Jipapchir Pamra Shao, Tetagna Mi Gubstava Yuno, Sashang Chopatan, Sarkovatan, Man Juratan, Lagnif Tagbatan, Zarkar Tagbatan, Joa Tagbatan, Steve Sheparnam Mashago.
Okay, today this is how much we're going to study. Well, we're going to use a few days to study this particular sutra, the Sutra of the Last Bequeathed by the Buddha. In fact, this is a very well-known sutra. Many masters from the older days as well as in the modern days have given teachings on this particular sutra. And the current version that we're studying, in fact, this one is translated by Kumar Jiva into the Chinese language. He translated this around 300 AD. Because Kumar Jiva, in fact, lived between 343 AD to 413. And then later, Dharma Raksha, for example, his translation of the Ulambana Sutra, that was a little bit later than Kumar Jiva. Kumar Jiva, he was living during the Qing dynasty. The Qing dynasty was not the Great Qing dynasty, was rather Yao Qing dynasty, that is post-Qing dynasty. In terms of the age of Kumar Jiva, in fact, there's a book where it discussed or talked about a different opinion of Kumar Jiva's age. In this book, it was first composed in the Tibetan language, and it was composed by a Mongolian, a very erudic scholar, and he composed this book called The Sources and Teachings of Chinese Buddhism. He was a great minister, also a very respected scholar. When I went to Mount Wutai, I carried his Tibetan version of this book. And recently, this book was translated by a Chinese professor into a Chinese language. This book, in fact, talked about many great masters and wise Lotsawas, the great translators, and all kinds of sutras and shastras as translated to the mainland. In fact, not only it talked about Kumarjiva, many great translators such as Buddharuchi, Dharmaraksha, and so on. In fact, lots of those descriptions and introductions were included in his book. In terms of talking about Kumarjiva, first of all, it described all kinds of contribution that Kumarjiva made in terms of his translation, and there's a catalog of all the translated versions, translated sutras. That was all the sutras are translated by him. And there was a story where he talked about at the time he had over a dozen of consorts, and some of his disciples then generated a wrong view towards him. He then swallowed a whole bowl of iron needles, and then all of the needles were dispersed from his pores. Not sure if the translator understood, or maybe for various reasons that's unknown. Within this book, it says that Kumarjiva passed away at the age of 42. And in the Tibetan version, it also says 42. Not sure why it is. But according to the Chinese Buddhism, it was commonly recognized that he lived for 70 years. And this particular sutra that's translated by Kumarjiva, in fact, it was indeed quite early. What kind of impact did it make in terms of the Chinese Buddhism? You probably know that all the way back from Tang Dynasty, Yuan Dynasty, Song Dynasty, and then Ming Dynasty. In fact, this particular text was very popular during all of those, or throughout all of those dynasties. The Tang Emperor back then, from the Tang Dynasty, he recommended people to copy this particular sutra, let it be the monastics or lay practitioners. So he also provided ink and pen and brush and paper so that they would copy this particular text. And he required each of the county and all the authorities running different counties to ask the citizens to copy this particular sutra. If the monastics do not practice in accordance to this particular sutra or violated some of the rules that's described in the sutra, then they would receive various kinds of punishment, or they would be warned. We can see that the emperor definitely placed a great emphasis on this particular sutra. As a great emperor, he would give various orders to the different places in the whole country and ask various various people, for example, the officers and the citizens and farmers and all of those functionaries, monastics, as well as lay practitioners. Everyone should copy this and study it. So we can see that this kind of propagation definitely brought great influence, and it's a long-lasting influence. Later in the Song dynasty, the Songjun emperor also placed a great importance on this particular sutra. He not only printed and propagated this teaching by printing, and also he propagated this particular sutra to the bordering countries. We can see that if a leader of a country or emperor of a country placed importance on a sutra and propagated, then the citizen would also follow that kind of faith, or would also follow that kind of trend, and would take great faith in the Buddha's teaching. Also, in the later times, there are many kinds of commentaries, but because of the ups and downs and because of the different changes throughout history, many of those commentaries were lost in the river of history. And then, during Song dynasty, some of those commentaries were finally survived. Throughout Song, Yuan, and different dynasties, many great masters composed commentaries upon this particular sutra. For example, Master Qi Yuan's commentary. And that particular commentary is of great value and infused with his wisdom and insights. And there is another commentary that is worth mentioning, which is of great value, also very reliable. And this particular commentary on the Sutra of the Last Bequeathed, many thought this particular shastra was composed by Ashvaghosha. But Master Oyi, in his commentary, he said that this particular commentary was not composed by Ashvaghosha, rather it was composed by Vasubandhu. And it is included in the Tibetan Tripitaka as well. Whenever you listen to the class, I really hope that you can cross-reference with those different commentaries, the commentaries of the past masters or the commentary of the modern masters. It's quite important to take those references. Some of those audios or videos of teachings given by other great masters, then you can cross-reference with those. I haven't really heard if there's any videos of the teachings of this sutra. I only know that Master Xuanhua had given this teaching, and Master Xu Yun's disciples also give teachings. Some modern masters given teachings on this particular sutra as well. In general, my opinion is that whenever we study any Dharma teachings, we have to develop thorough understanding. And if you were to develop a thorough understanding, you have to cross-reference with many teachings from various masters and through different kinds of commentaries as well. You can't just rely upon one teacher's one teaching. Our life cannot, we cannot waste our life, we cannot waste our time, because it is definitely of great preciousness. The other day I told the Khenpos and Khenmos, and I said that I think it would be really wonderful to give more teachings to the others rather than expanding on one or two verses every day. And they told me that, well, we did give teachings on the great commentary on Sukhavati. Well, I think those are wonderful. On one hand, you definitely need to have detailed explanation on certain sutras or shastras. On the other, I think it's quite important to give more condensed teachings to the disciples. So in this way, everyone over here would be able to use their time staying in Larangar and study a wide range of teachings. Otherwise, if you were to study in a certain place for 10 years and you only studied the 5 treatises, then that's it. And you have only this 5 years worth of knowledge to pass on to the others after you have to go to different places and propagate the Dharma. It would be quite a shame that you can only teach for 5 years. Therefore, it is quite important for the Khenpos and Khenmos to make a balance of the slower teachings and slower and more explicit teachings, as well as the more brief and condensed teachings. The two different styles of teachings are both important. So let us then study this sutra in a more brief and condensed way. Since I do not have a long or an oral transmission of this particular sutra, but since we are studying the sutra that's directly taught by the Buddha, I don't think there is anything wrong with it. There's nothing that we can't, there's no saying that we shouldn't study it if we don't have any oral transmission. However, if it is, for example, a Tantrayana teaching, they would definitely have to have an oral transmission. Otherwise, it is inappropriate. In the Tantrayana, for example, the Kriya, Acharya Yoga, and Anuttara Yoga, all of those tantras, especially in the Anuttara Yoga, the unsurpassed yoga, where it then branch into the Father Tantra, Mother Tantra, and non-dual Tantra. And you have to understand each of those, and you have to receive appropriate empowerments in order to receive the various teachings from the various tantras. So without proper empowerment and or transmission alone, it is not appropriate to receive the Tantra teachings. However, since we're studying the Sutrayana teachings, it is then we don't have to meet all of those kinds of requirements. This time, since we're studying this Sutra's Bequeathed teaching, it is in fact of a great opportunity. Also, this particular sutra is called a short Parinirvana Sutra or a concised version of a Parinirvana Sutra. I'm not sure within our lifetime would we ever be able to read the entire Parinirvana Sutra, but at least if we have this opportunity to study this concise, this short Parinirvana Sutra that is of the Buddha's last bequeathed, it would be of great importance to all of us, and it would be very meaningful to all of us as well, because these teachings are the last teachings given by the Buddha. Think about Phuntsok Rinpoche. Before he departed from this world, he gave us the teaching of one should not abandon one's own path and do not disturb the other's heart. Do not disturb the other's mind. So this is really the last teaching, his will, before he passed into Parinirvana. Also look at Garab Dorje, look at Vimala Mitra and Manjushri Mitra, as well as Pamasambhava. They also left great teachings before they passed away. And all such kind of teachings are of great importance. I think the last teaching is given by the Buddha. The ones that's given to the Shravakas, also the common vehicle disciples, are of great importance to all of us today still. Therefore, I think it's quite important to study this Sutra of the Last Bequeathed. All these teachings that's given throughout the whole life of the Buddha are of great importance, and we should definitely pay attention to the last teachings that he've given to us as well. For those people who don't pay attention to it, I don't think that they should be considered as Buddhists. As Buddhists, we should definitely place great importance to these teachings. They are of great meaning, great blessings, and it is definitely worthwhile for us to practice with great contemplation and deep reflection. Therefore, through the time that we study this particular teaching, I think that we should pay lots of attention, and you may be able to discover more meanings within this teaching than you thought it would be. If you were to feel that, well, why does it matter? It doesn't matter to me at all. I think if you have that kind of mentality, then you're not really considered as a true Buddhist. For a true, genuine Buddhist, I believe all of you would definitely develop a sense of cherishing mind towards the last teachings that's given by the Buddha. And you would be able to understand that it is definitely worthwhile and it is of great importance.
那这个依照经的话呢，就是我就不多说，就是说这个就是最后呢，就是留下来的这个教诫这个弟子的这部这个经典。
I don't think I need to go on for too long in terms of the importance of this sutra. The sutra was the last one that's given by the Buddha and was translated by Kumarajiva. And in terms of the translator Kumarajiva, we've already taught about him for many times when we talked about for example, when we studied the Vimalakirti Sutra and the Lotus Sutra, and what's the other sutra that we studied? We also talked about Kumarajiva. Diamond Sutra? There's more. I believe recently we've also talked about him. Which of the sutras that we studied last year were translated by Kumarajiva? Well, let's try to remember that. I'm not going to go on for too long about Kumarajiva, as we may already know that Kumarajiva is a great master of great realization. And we already know that he propagated the Mahayana teaching. And when he first went to India with his mother, he made the aspiration, and he kept on thinking that though going to India is not going to bring myself any benefit, but in order to bring the benefit to the sentient beings, then I shall go with you. And eventually he became a great translator, and one of the greatest, really. Not only his translation is of great concise, and it is of great blessings as well. He was born in the kingdom of Kucha. However, he had benefited the beings in China mainland area, and he had contributed so much to the Buddhism's propagation in China. He first was also think of Venerable Atisha, who was Indian and then later came to Tibet to propagate the Dharma. And because of his choice, his lifespan were decreased for 20 years. However, his propagation in Tibet was of great importance and was made a great importance. Sometimes people may not be of a certain ethnic to that country, and maybe they would bring very unique benefit to the people of other ethnics of other countries. There are situations like such. Now let's look at this sutra, the Buddha's last bequest. At the beginning of this particular sutra, it doesn't really say that thus have I heard. There are some sutras that it says it has that as an opening of the sutra, some doesn't. But we should not simply think that, it cannot be a genuine sutra because it doesn't have it. We shouldn't think in such a way, because even in the Tibetan version, some of the sutras do have the sentence of thus have I heard, and some of them doesn't. The other day, I was thinking of translating the commentary composed by Vasubandhu. I've wanted to do that for many years, but this one was translated by Master Jendi, which was very difficult to understand. And when I flip back to Vasubandhu's commentary, it feels like his commentary is even more difficult to understand. And so it could be a little bit difficult for me to translate. Anyhow, later on when I have time, I do have such kind of aspiration. Maybe because of the study of Abhidharma, whenever I talk about Vasubandhu, whenever that name Vasubandhu came across, lots of Khenpo Khenmos and especially lots of Tibetans would develop great faith. Of course, whenever you generate any faith towards the Buddha's sutras and the shastras and commentaries composed by Vasubandhu, I think that is really great. I do have such kind of opinion myself. I have lots of faith towards Vasubandhu's teaching as well, because he is renowned as the second Buddha. If he were to write a commentary, then whenever people think of, Vasubandhu wrote a commentary on this sutra, on this teaching, then there's no doubt that this teaching is definitely going to be very great and same as the Shastra. So after knowing that Vasubandhu composed the commentary on this sutra, then we should definitely be aware of how important this sutra is. Though there is the commentary composed by Vasubandhu, however, I did not see any other commentaries that's composed in the Tibetan language, and I did not see any other commentaries. This particular sutra was translated circa 300 AD, and it's not very widely talked about in the Tibetan Tripitaka. I think for people with the talent of languages, for example, the bilinguals and people who are polyglots, you should try to translate this sutra, or translate sutras and teachings and shastras into other languages. For example, this particular Sutra of the Last Bequest has 4 different versions in English, and then there's the Japanese version, Korean version, and other different languages as well, and also the Mongolian version too. However, other than that, this sutra was not placed of great importance in other countries, in the Western countries, or even inside the Buddhist circle. I really think that we should try our best to translate as much as we can, though it is difficult at the beginning since you don't probably have lots of experience and don't have a good level in terms of translation. But you should try your best to practice and to study. I myself have very limited wisdom. At the beginning, I tried and did lots of research and explored. It is only after 10 years of doing oral translation I put my translation into written words. So it is quite important. But I think don't prolong this process because it is hard to say how much opportunity you'll be able to have. Our time is definitely very limited. Therefore, try your best to translate. For example, Phuntsog Rinpoche's teaching on the Song of Victory, his Doha song, this is really important. We should try our best to translate it into many different languages and write it down as well. Just like how Phuntsog Rinpoche's teaching in Canada about his teaching on the meaning of three jewels is now translated into, I think, over a dozen, nearly 20 different languages. This is really a wonderful dependent origination that could bring sentient beings to the Dharma and to be nurtured by the great nectar of the Dharma. Any kinds of language, as long as you understand it, even if you're not very good at translating it, any language really, this kind of language that may sound very gibberish to the others, such as the ones I've stated. What do you think I was trying to mimic? Thai? No. Thai sounds like this. All right, so let us continue with the teaching. Well, in the sutra, it started by saying that when Shakyamuni Buddha first turned the wheel of Dharma, he first turned the Dharma wheel and gave the teachings of the Four Noble Truths at Deer Park. And the first disciple he had, or the first person he crossed over the ocean of birth and death, is Anakodana. He first had five disciples, and the five bhikshus were considered as the relatives, 3 from his father's side and 2 from his mother's side. The Buddha taught for 49 years, and then at the last turning of the Dharma wheel, he crossed over the Venerable Subhadra. The Chinese translation is Subhadra is directly translated as the good manifestation. If you remember the story of Subhadra, if you remember that there was once a story that an old man who aged about 120 years of age, he was suffering with great pain, and at the time he really wanted to get ordained. However, he was rejected by many monasteries, and people rejected him by saying that he is too old to get ordained. The Arhats couldn't see that he had any virtuous roots planted in his previous lives to be able to get ordained in this lifetime. Therefore, he got really upset and he wanted to commit suicide by jumping into the river Ganges. And then the Buddha appeared in front of him, asking him, "What are you doing here?" He replied to the Buddha saying that there's really no meaning for me to live in this world. I can't see clearly, can't hear clearly. I don't even have any appetite for food, and everyone treats me with disrespect. And even you, the follower of the Buddha, do not take me in. So that's why I just want to leave this world. And the Buddha said that, no, you don't have to commit suicide. side, I will take you in and I will grant you refuge. And after the Buddha granted him refuge, he received the fruition of arhathood, and he was considered as the last person that the Buddha crossed over, which means liberated before his parinirvana. Throughout the whole life of the Buddha, in fact, there are the sentient beings who made connections, the auspicious connections with him, or any connections with him. The Buddha had already liberated them all. We usually would say that the Buddha would not be able to liberate the ones who do not create any auspicious connections, and that is very true. For example, there was once an old lady who lived around the eastern side of the city, and whenever the Buddha appears, she would cover up her face and would not see him at all. And even if the Buddha would manifest in all the 4 and 8 directions, the old woman would cover up her face and would refuse to see the Buddha. It is not to say that she did not plant any virtuous root, nor have any connections to the correct Dharma. At that time, the Buddha said that this old lady has auspicious connection to Ananda, though Ananda at the time was a mundane being. He had not attained arhathood at the time, but she generated great faith towards Ananda, and then eventually she was able to attain a noble fruition as well. That is why we can see that the great spiritual leaders in this world, sometimes they manifest in various ways. That is because their different manifestations would be able to liberate different sentient beings. At the time, the Buddha had already arrived at the twin sala tree, and he was about to pass into parinirvana. The twin sala tree, it was said that the actual tree where the Buddha passed into parinirvana was destroyed by the invasion of a certain religion, and now the sala tree that is over there is the tree that's planted afterwards. But it was said that I remember that when we visited over there, we chanted some aspiration along with Phuntsok Rinpoche. I remember that some people from some monastics and people from Thailand built a stupa over there to commemorate the parinirvana of the Buddha. I remember very vividly, it was around the time of the sunset, and we were staying at the place where the Buddha passed into parinirvana. It was very sad, and all of our hearts were in great sadness, just as if the Buddha passed into parinirvana in front of us. We all felt such kind of different atmosphere, as if the sun of the world had already go down, and it felt quite upsetting. I think whenever you have an opportunity to pay pilgrimage to the 4 pilgrimage places of the Buddha, the first one is the birthplace of the Buddha. That is Lumbini. And then the place where the Buddha attained enlightenment, that is the Vajra seat in India. And then where he practiced asceticism was Nirachana River, and then where he turned the Dharma wheel. In fact, there are 3 places. The first place of turning the first Dharma wheel was in the Deer Park, and the second was Vulture Peak, where he turned the second turning of the Dharma wheel on emptiness, on prajna, paramita, and the third one. In fact, the third turning of the Dharma wheel is when he gives teachings on the Buddha nature, which is not very specific. For example, some said it was in the celestial realm and different pure lands and so on and so forth. And the last one is where the Buddha appeared to enter into parinirvana, that is under the twin salad tree. So those are the places. According to Vinaya Sutra, it says that after I pass into parinirvana, my followers should pay homage or pay pilgrimage visits to these 4 noble places, and that is of no difference than paying a pilgrimage to myself. When it comes to the understanding of the birth date of the Buddha, for example, according to the Sutra of Contemplating upon the Buddha, it says that he was born on the 8th day of the 4th month in the midnight. Though there are different records and different theories on which of the month it was, and so on and so forth. However, when it comes to the understanding of the full enlightenment of the Buddha, it is commonly recognized that he attained full enlightenment right before dawn, when the Venus was bright in the sky. And then when he passed into parinirvana, it was at the time in the middle period of the night, and all was quiet without any sound. Then, for the sake of all of his disciples, the Buddha spoke on the essentials of the Dharma in a very concise way. This sutra, we should be aware that in fact this sutra is not based on the perspective of Mahayana nor of Tantrayana. Rather, it was more from the common vehicle, the Theravada tradition or the Shravaka tradition. So the teachings also, the teachings are more targeted to the audience that are those who are monastics, the ones who got ordained. So let it be for the Theravada monastics or the Chinese or the Tibetan monastics. In fact, it would be a really wonderful sutra for all of you to uphold. The lay practitioners, of course, it would be wonderful for you to practice upon this. However, as a lay practitioner, I think the things that's taught in this sutra would be a little bit difficult for you to uphold. The teachings over here mainly focused to give the teachings to the bhikshus, bhikshunis, shramanera, and shramanerikas. Around the time of passing into parinirvana, the Buddha then gives some specific teachings in terms of the Vinaya, specific requirements, and what is allowed and what is not allowed. At that time, the Buddha asked, "So Ananda, do you have any questions in terms of observing precepts?" But at that time, the Mara was interfering with Ananda. Therefore, Ananda didn't hear the questions posed by the Buddha at the time. Therefore, he didn't ask. But the Buddha, though, didn't speak too much about what is allowed and what is not allowed in terms of Vinaya. The Buddha did indeed say that one should practice in accordance with the mentality and actions of the local people, which is considered as a very important teaching at the time. time. And now let's look at the sutra over here. It says, all of you bhikshus, after my nirvana, you should revere and honor the pratimoksha. Pratimoksha, the Buddha over here says that you should respect and honor pratimoksha. Pratimoksha means the vows to take in order to attain liberation. After the Buddha said that after my nirvana, you should pay attention to pratimoksha vow. And he said that it is like finding a light in darkness, and it is that you should know that when I am alive, I am your teacher, but when I am not alive, when I'm not actually present in this world, you should take the vows, the precepts as your teacher. So he said that it is like finding a light in darkness, a pitch dark night. If you were to see a bright light shining in front of you, that would be really wonderful. So that's the function of the precepts. Or, like a poor person obtaining a treasure, a wish-fulfilling jewel, wouldn't that be wonderful? It is said that wouldn't it be wonderful that you encounter a great teacher such as the Buddha, such as your guru, and you are able to take the pratimoksha vow to attain liberation. That is just like obtaining a treasure for a poor person. Or when you are walking in the pitch dark night and you have a light shining in front of you. According to Ranakuta Sutra and many other sutras, in fact, it is stated that if you were to see my body, my form, however, if you do not observe the precepts, then it is of no meaning. Just like Devadatta have already met me, but he did not observe the precepts, then what's the meaning in that? What's the importance in seeing me? However, if you were to observe the precepts, though you may not see my form, but it is no different from my actual presence in this world. For people who can actually study and observe the precepts, then you should pay attention and respect such kind of pratimoksha vow. We now have encountered the vows, the precepts, and the teachings. If we were to encounter the Buddha himself during this dark age, we may not recognize him at all. However, since we already know the importance of the teachings, that is really of no other and no difference of the real Buddha, we should try our best to observe those teachings that's given by the Buddha and the precepts that's given by the Buddha. There are times, of course, some of the vows are easy to observe and some of which are difficult. But you should not give up completely just because you can't observe certain vows. You should try your best to observe the vows as much as you can. You don't need to think that, if I can't if I can't observe all the vows, then I am completely hopeless. There's really no meaning for my life, and so on and so forth. You shouldn't think in such a way. Rather, it is quite important to think that I am really fortunate that I have encountered the Dharma and I should try my best to practice. Though my practice is not that great, and sometimes I am still tinted by the 3 poisons, but at least I have encountered the Dharma. And I know that at least there will be an ending to the samsara. So you should generate a sense of faith, generate a sense of self-confidence. But nowadays, what I notice in terms of the Buddhists is that people tend to only talk about their negative aspects. They would say that I'm so ashamed of myself, I am such a pitiful person, and I am so embarrassed about the things I've done. I have no wisdom and I have so much afflictions. I am completely ignorant and stupid, and I am so fettered by all kinds of the three poisons. They would write all kinds of words to describe the negative aspects of them. As a practitioner, we should try not to be too negative, too emotional, and we should try our best not to pass down that negative energy to the others. Nowadays, it seems that though there are people who have lots of great opportunities, and I really think that they have pretty good practice, at least some really good experiences. However, it seems that they're not confident at all. Without such kind of confidence, they would only talk about their shortcomings. I myself, I'm quite content with myself, though sometimes I don't do well in some areas. I do have some negative habitual patterns. However, I think I do practice virtue as well. We should try our best not to zoom in to our negative aspect and zoom out of our virtuous aspect. Otherwise, it will be difficult for you to survive in this world. We have to recognize ourselves in a truthful way. We can recognize that we have shortcomings. At the same time, we have lots of virtuous deeds and advantages as well. Such as, for example, you're staying at a place where you're practicing and you are already a Buddhist and listening to the teachings given by a virtuous Dharma teacher, and you have such opportunities to listen to the Dharma teachings, let it be esoteric or exoteric, and you can use some time to practice and contemplate and study, and you're trying your best to benefit sentient beings. At least you can chant mantras. There are beings who can't even chant Om Mani Padme Hum. Even the smartest animals, they can't do that. They don't even understand it. But at least now we can use a prayer wheel, we can chant the dedication of merit of Shamathabhadra and all of those virtuous deeds. So let us not think too lowly of ourselves, because that is also considered as laziness. That being said, don't get too arrogant either. If you don't understand anything, don't have any virtue nor merit, but being too arrogant, that is not good either. The middle way, really. Okay. Before talks about you shouldn't do this and shouldn't do that, I think I first have to remind you about the middle way. There are especially the ones who first started studying the Dharma. If they were to hear about you can't do this, you can't do that either, they might get very scared and probably don't want to study the Dharma anymore. That is not necessary. Over here, it only talks about how important it is to observe the pratimoksha vows, according to the letter to a friend, where it says that the precept is just like the ground that could hold all that is moving and immovable, and it is the root of all the virtues. So, observing precepts are very important. Over here, the precepts that stated are mainly towards the monastics. The lay practitioners, after you have upheld the 5 precepts of lay practitioners, there are some particular ones you can uphold as well. According to a sutra that is said the skillful means of repaying the kindness of the Buddha, it also says that, in fact, the Buddha did not ban the practitioners or lay practitioners to engage in business and selling and all of those. However, the Buddha did say that as a lay practitioner, as a Buddhist lay practitioner, you should forsake the kind of business such as selling weapons, selling the intoxicants, and such as alcohol, and killing, the kind of business such as killing and butchering. Those are taught by the Buddha. Let's look at the first one. Over here it says that those of you who uphold the pure precepts should not buy, sell, or trade. As a monastic, a true practitioner, if you were to buy, sell, or trade, engage in those kind of business, such as the ones stated in the words of my perfect teacher, in fact, by engaging in business and trading, other than wrong view and sexual misconduct, the rest of the 10 unvirtuous deeds would all naturally appear or spontaneously appear or get entangled. Therefore, if you were to practice in selling and trading and business, then definitely you will engage in all kinds of vice deeds. According to Vinaya, it says that if one were to engage in business and trading for the sake of the Sangha and for the sentient beings, then that is allowed. The monastics, in fact, do receive offerings. Therefore, it is not necessary for them to earn or to engage in business and trading. But for lay practitioners, of course, you can engage in certain practices. Now, the second one says that one should not engage in coveting fields or buildings. As a monastic, it is definitely forbidden to covet any fields or buildings or invest in real estates and so on and so forth. Look at the great masters of the past, let it be Baizhang Zen master or Master Xu Yun. They would work they would only eat on that day if they were to work for that day, and they are completely self-reliant. They would only plow the field and grow vegetables for themselves so that they can be self-sufficient. Some of them, they in fact did it for the Sangha. Therefore, they have to work as a farmer, but usually as a monastic, it is not allowed for the monastics to grow crops but of course, over here, we don't really have enough space for people to grow crops. Lots of people probably don't even have a yard where they can grow crops. Therefore, I'm sure there's no such kind of things happening, such kind of growing vegetables and growing crops over here. But I'm not sure how it's going to happen later and whether it's going to become degenerated in such a way. Earlier, we were having a meeting and talking about the future of Larongar. Many of the business people running a business around this area, they were saying that if we were to maintain to be closed during this pandemic, they would run out of business because they don't have any visitors coming to Larongar anymore. I personally feel that it would be the best for us to be closed down because it is rather much quieter, and it would be really good for the practitioners to practice without lots of distractions. The other day I also talked about people should not have cars because there's really no space for us to park the cars over here either. So you should be prepared for those of you who have private cars. It is not allowed to have private cars over here. I know second-hand cars nowadays tend to be really cheap. For a few thousand RMB, you can get pretty good cars. But this kind of trend would only lead to distraction happening in Larungar. And if we get more people, more cars, more distractions, then all the genuine practitioners would have no other choice but to depart from here. Therefore, as practitioners, we really should part from this kind of business of engage in real estate and engage in business and trading. The third one says that one should not keep servants or raise animals. Those are not allowed either. To have servants, have attendants, to have pets, all of those are not allowed. You should pay attention. Many of you who are staying here tend to really like animals, cats, dogs, and spend lots of money on those pets as well. I also heard that in China mainland, there are people who only likes dogs, and they don't like people around. And they would spend all their money on their pets and even buy insurance for their pets. All kinds of situations like that. Well, I can't really talk too much about what people do over there in the cities, but we can talk about what's happening here. This is a pure practice center. If everyone were to have a pet, a little dog or a little kitten, in fact, this is not good. In terms of servants and attendants, some of the Dharma teachers, if you were to have the kind of influence and capacity, it would be the best not to get so many attendants. Especially, I think with attendants, it could be quite troublesome. The more attendants and people who serve you, the more troublesome it could get. When I get really busy, I sometimes have to ask them to pack my luggage and so on and so forth. But this winter, I actually spent the whole retreat by myself. I had to cook for myself and do everything by myself. But I felt it was very happy and a very good winter. Nowadays, after I got back, there are people who cook breakfast for me. I felt very happy. I felt quite content because if I were to cook for myself, it's going to take a long period of time. On the other hand, if we completely rely on the others to live, that would be very suffering. Unless, of course, if you suffer from great illness and you really don't have the ability to do things for yourself, then of course you can rely on the others. But normally speaking, let it be in our life, let it be in any relationship or in terms of our wealth or finances and faith, we have to be independent. And we can't rely upon the others. And that would be a person of great wisdom to be independent. You can't count happiness on the others. Count on the others for your own happiness. So this is taught by the Buddha. And then the fourth one, where it says that you should also stay away from all kinds of agriculture and wealth as you would avoid a pit of fire. According to a sutra, I can't remember which one, probably the great ornament of the sutra, great ornament of Mahayana Sutra Shastra, where it states that Ananda and the Buddha were walking in a field, and then the Buddha saw this piece of gold, and they said that, oh, there's a poisonous snake over there. A farmer heard and felt great terror when he approaches that area and he saw that in fact it was a piece of gold. He was extremely happy. He said that this is not poisonous snake. Can I take it home, please? And because of that gold, then he later committed to some crime and then was imprisoned, and he suffered gravely because of such kind of cause of finding that piece of gold. And then he understood that if indeed the worldly wealth is of no difference than a great poisonous snake, and one should part from this. But of course, if you were to say that wealth and agriculture and planting is not good and we should completely eradicate all of those kind of actions. We shouldn't be that extreme. In fact, if we don't have those trading or business over here, if we close down all of our shops tomorrow, that is not going to be very convenient for people living here. That is an extreme. If we do not engage in planting flowers and trees, that is not good either, because when we're planting those flowers and trees to beautify this environment, it is not in fact just for ourselves. Rather, it is to create a beautiful environment for the whole Sangha. So those kind of things should be, those kind of actions should be carried out. When the Buddha was still alive, he indeed taught on what is allowed and what is not. So we should understand the meaning of it. And then the fifth one says that you should not cut down grass or trees, plow fields, or dig the earth. Mainly, these kinds of actions would harm vegetation as well as insects, living beings. Therefore, those are not allowed. People who've studied precepts, Vinayas, you would understand this. You should not plow the fields and destroy grass and trees. The sixth one is, nor may you compound medicines. Let it be the Chinese traditional medicine or any kind of traditional medicine or Western medicine, and prescribe those medicine to the others and earn money from it. Those kind of actions are not allowed. However, if you were to serve the Sangha inside of a clinic, then that is allowed. There are so many situations nowadays where the clinic or doctors would fool the patients by saying that, oh, you're gravely ill, you have to take this and this medicine, which is going to cost you 1,000 RMB. But indeed, the patient doesn't have that severe illness at all. But the doctor would tell them so in order to earn money from it. That is why over here it is forbidden by the Buddha. The seventh one says that prophesize good and evil. Prophesizing or looking at the omens, I think we should pay extra attention to this as monastics. Of course, there are lay practitioners who are like this as well, who only pay attention to prophesizing. There are people who would say that, oh, when I look at your face, I know that you will encounter a great problem after 2 years. But those are not true. I mean, people could speak whatever they like without any reason. So why should we believe in that? When the Buddha, about to pass into parinirvana, the Buddha taught very clearly, saying that monastic or lay practitioner, unless, of course, if you have this kind of superpower of clairvoyance, you can say that you can probably help the others in such a way. But before you tell the others, you should probably go through a test by telling the others what's going to happen to them after 3 days. But if you don't even know what's going to happen to them after 3 days, how would you be able to tell what's going to happen to them after 3 years? Some practitioners do not understand the true teaching of Buddhism. I understand for those people who first got into Buddhism and don't even understand this yet. I think at the beginning of when I was in school, I read a book talking about how the different lines on your hand could foretell your fortune. And I would tell my classmates by saying that, how's your health, how's your marriage, and so on and so forth. And then when I was still in school, people would come to me and ask me how their fortune would be. But after you take the monastic vow, after you take the lay practitioner's vow, you shouldn't do that anymore. The 8th one says that you should not observe the constellations. According to I Ching, as well as lots of the constellation and calculations according to Tibetan tradition or from the Chinese tradition, there are certain calculations to see whether this day is auspicious or not. However, nowadays, it has been all of these kind of calculations has been monetized into a type of business where people would particularly sell those kind of information and to even concede the others in terms of this, to lie to the others in order to earn money. This is not good. And then the 9th one is geomancy. One should not engage in any kinds of observation of geomancy related to feng shui. The other day, a celebrity said that he bought a house that costed about a few $1 million, and then a feng shui master told him that after a few years there would be a great disaster. And then this celebrity came to me. I said, well, it's not necessary. You can chant some sutras and practice virtuous deeds, and certain kinds of causes and conditions may not ripen in such a way. But I don't really look at the geomancy. I don't really practice in those kind of calculations of feng shui or anything. The 10th one says that one should not observe the waxing and waning of the moon or compute the astrological fortunes. There are some Khenpos and Khenmos, they really like the astrology and horoscopes. Well, sometimes it's okay, but you don't necessarily have to believe so much into it. The other day, I flipped through Tripitaka and I saw there's a sutra. It's called Manjushri, and the Manjushri, as well as other sages teaching on the auspiciousness and vice of the constellations, where in fact it talks about the 12 horoscopes, talks about the constellations. In fact, observing the constellations, the feng shui, does constellation and the feng shui actually makes a difference? Yes, they do. For example, in Checkmate Rinpoche's teachings, he did give teachings on feng shui and to talk about how to observe the auspicious and the vice kinds of causes and conditions whenever you have to travel far. There are all kinds of ways of doing divination as well, but we shouldn't use all those kind of knowledge to deceive the sentient beings. That is not proper. If you do not pay attention to divination, sometimes the causes and the fruition of such causes and conditions could be quite horrifying. According to the miscellaneous Agama Sutra, where it says that once the Madhgalyayana saw a non-human, and he has this burning iron wand on top of his head, and he was suffering gravely. And Madhgalyayana, after seeing the causes, told the others, said that this particular sentient being was a woman who practiced divination and lied to many people. Therefore, this person is suffering in hell realm. After hell realm, she will be reborn as a non-human to experience immeasurable numbers of suffering. There's another sutra, it's called the Miscellaneous Treasure Sutra of the Buddha, where it says that there was once a Mara who wanted to bathe in in the Ganges River. Once he jumped into Ganges River, his whole body was lit up in fire, and even the water that he wanted to drink all became the hot iron that's melted into liquid and burning his body continuously. After observing causes conditions, Madhyagalaya saw this particular person, this particular Mara was also practicing divination in his previous life and deceived lots of sentient beings. So after saying those, I really hope that all of you do not live in the result of the divinations, do not grasp onto those mo predictions, do not think about to know your future through those divinations, those predictions and horoscope and so on and so forth. Do not think, do not only grasp onto those. If there are people who grasp onto this kind of divination, we can say in confidence that this person is at least or at best a little bit superstitious. If a person understands the causes and conditions of the three times, then at least they won't spend so much time in practicing divination or ask others to practice divination for them. We can observe ourselves as well as the others. In fact, before the prosperity of Buddhism, there were many people who paid lots of attention to this kind of culture, this kind of folk culture. But I think we need to understand both causes and conditions as well as the difference between that and divination. Let's not get too superstitious. We should behave like a monastic, and we should behave like a lay practitioner that you are. Later on, in the later part of the sutra, the Buddha then talks about how to become a good practitioner. Some people would use the excuse by saying that, oh no, some people would use the excuse of the Sangha and in fact practice trading and business as earning money and divination, predictions and fortune telling, practice all of those kinds of inappropriate actions to deceive self and the others, and those kind of actions would only lead to unhappiness of this life and future lifetimes. I think lots of the teachings within this sutra could be a great reminder for all of you. I really hope that the practitioners over here should have wisdom and practice with such kind of wisdom. Let's not practice in this kind of especially place great importance on superstition, on divination, and so on and so forth. I know a few of those very renowned female practitioners who really enjoy divination practice, who kept on calling the others and kept on requiring divination for the others and so on and so forth. There are lay practitioners whom do not understand causes and fruition, which is understandable. But for people who've already practiced and listened to the Dharma for so many years over here and still going around and spending their time to practice divination to serve for their own benefit, that is very pitiful. And for those people who believe in those kind of divinations, you should have your wisdom and you should be more steadfast. Do not squander your lifetime in going around to get divinations. If you really want divinations and predictions, why don't you go to various places? There are lots of people who do this for. There are people who do this as a business. You can go around and do that. You don't have to disturb the practitioners over here. You should engage in great contemplation and think about why Buddha taught on this. Okay, we should stop here today.
Sonam dai dhamche zubani tonani be jana panshe jirgana che ranlong chubali chubum zonen jowa jo